Hello friends, this is Raman Gill with your weekly Forex market analysis for the week of April the 3rd. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. This is for educational purposes only. If you have questions about your individual investing needs, I suggest you talk to your investment advisor. So as usual, we'll get started with the economic calendar, then we'll get into the commitment of traders data and take a look at how the big funds are positioned. Finally, we'll get into technical analysis and look at some of the levels we'll be watching this week. Some of the broad fundamental themes for this week that we are looking at. First, for the euro, we have ECB monetary policy meeting accounts and President Draghi speaking. When we have the ECB President Draghi speaking, usually there's a lot of volatility in the markets, especially around the euro. So watch out for that. For US dollar, we have FOMC meeting minutes, and also we have Fed Chair Yellen speaking this week again. Last week, we heard a lot of dovish comments from Yellen, and because of that, US dollar tanked. So again, a lot of volatility when Yellen's speaking, so be mindful of that. For Australian dollar, we have interest rate and rate statement. Now let's take a look at the weekly calendar. Starting the week off here, we have news for Australian dollar. We have building approvals and retail sales numbers. This is important data for Australian dollar, so we'll watch out for that. There's a lot of Australian dollar data coming out this week, so just keep that in mind. On Monday, we have construction PMI numbers for the British pound in the European session. We also have unemployment rate for the euro. And then going into the US session, we have Bank of Canada Governor Pola speaking. Market will be watching for these comments. We have seen Canadian dollar go up, and there's a divergence currently in commodity prices and the commodity currencies, Canadian dollar being one of them. So watch out for what Governor Polas has to say, and because of that, we should see some reaction in the Canadian dollar. We have factory orders for US dollar on Monday as well. And then going into the Asian session, again, for Australian dollar, we have trade balance. And on Tuesday, early in the morning in the Asian session here, we have cash rate statement and RBA rate statement that I mentioned earlier. When these numbers get released, we should see volatility for the Australian dollar. So if you are trading anything that has Australian dollar in it, I would suggest keeping an eye on that. And then in the London session, we have services PMI for British pound, and also out of the Eurozone, we have German factory orders and PMI numbers. Then into the US session, we have Canadian dollar trade balance and US dollar trade balance, and then final services PMI number for the US dollar and ISM non-manufacturing PMI number for the US dollar. These PMI numbers are very important, so we have to keep an eye on these. And later in the session, we have GDT price index for New Zealand dollar. These are the dairy prices, and the New Zealand economy is dependent on the dairy, so keep an eye on that for trading the New Zealand dollar. On Wednesday, we have RBA Assistant Governor Kent speaking for Australian dollar. We have crude oil inventories in the US session, and then FOMC meeting minutes at 2 o'clock for the US. Although Yellen was very dovish in her comments in the statement, markets still will be looking at what was discussed during the meeting, so these meeting minutes become important. And then on Thursday, we have Halifax HPI number for the British pound. And then into the US session, we have ECB monetary policy meeting accounts for the euro, and then President Draghi speaking as well. Anytime that President Draghi speaking creates volatility in the market, so watch out for that. We also have unemployment claims for the US. And then further at 5:30 p.m., we have Fed Chair Yellen speaking. When Yellen speaks, again, just like Draghi, it creates market volatility, especially for the US dollar. So we'll keep an eye on that. And then on Friday, we have manufacturing production numbers for the British pound, and then unemployment rate and employment change numbers for the Canadian dollars. And that wraps up the week for the news. Now let's move on to commitment of traders data. Starting off with the euro here, recently we have seen a decrease in the short positions for the euro. So if you look at this green line in the bottom here, we have seen it go up, which means the short positions are getting reduced. So last week we had 68,000 short positions, and now that has been reduced to 63,000 short positions. This is bullish for the euro. For the British pound here, we have seen an increase in the short positions. So we've gone from 47,000 short positions to 51,000 short positions. So this here is bearish for the British pound. Let's take a look at the Canadian dollar here. Canadian dollar is quite the opposite. We have seen the short positions getting reduced here. We have seen an uptick here in this green line. If you're watching it last week, we had 15,000 short positions, and now we have down to 10,000 short positions. And looking at this asset manager positions, the red line here, it has crossed over into the positive territory. So the asset managers are actually holding long positions in the Canadian dollar, and this week those long positions have increased as well. So overall, this is bullish for the Canadian dollar, which means negative or bearish for dollar CAD. For Australian dollar here, we see quite the opposite picture from what we saw for the pound. We have seen this green line cross over the zero line, which means all these are long positions now. So leveraged money is holding long positions, as well as the asset managers. So the long positions for leveraged money increased from last week from 19,000 to now 24,000, and also the asset manager long positions went up as well. So overall, this is bullish for the Australian dollar. And looking at the New Zealand dollar here, we saw that the long positions, that the green line had crossed over the zero number, and we had seen an increase in the long positions here. So this week we have seen further increase in the long positions. We've gone from 4,200, 4,293 to 55.11 in long positions for the leveraged money. However, for the asset managers, we're still sitting in the negative territory. They're still holding short positions. So this New Zealand dollar is actually not as bullish as Australian dollar, where we saw both the asset managers and leveraged money holding long positions. So here, the more of the pension funds and everyone else, the asset managers are holding longer term. They're still short, whereas the speculative positions, the leverage funds, have actually gone into positive territory and they have increased their long positions. So overall, this is for the short term, this will be bullish for the New Zealand dollar. Now let's move on to our charts. We'll start off with Euro US dollar monthly chart here, just because we just recently closed the month. For the month of March, we saw a very strong uptick in the euro, and the candle closed quite bullish. So from the monthly perspective, this is very bullish. Let's take a look at the weekly chart here. Again, a very, very bullish close for the euro on the weekly chart as well. This points to a lot of strength in the euro. And looking at the daily chart here, we saw a spinning top. Although we saw non-farm payrolls come out as positive, we did not see the resultant strength in the US dollar compared to the euro. Euro still managed to hold above 1400 level. Now, in terms of our levels, we are looking at this 1340 level, looking for a pullback back into this level. And if the price holds above this level, we are looking at a move back into this, potentially into this 1500 level. And once we get past the 1500 level, we could be looking at this 1700 level. So again, we'll have to see whether the price stays above this 1300 level. And if it does, we're looking for a further move to the upside. However, we could see a deeper pullback here as well, and potentially back into the 1200 level. However, if the price does not go below 1200, again, we are looking for a further move up to 1500 potentially, and then back into the 1700 area. Looking at the pound here, we see the monthly, actually the candle is bullish. However, we have already started seeing a pullback. For the weekly chart here, we did see the price push up. However, there was a rejection. Even though it closed in the positive territory, there was a rejection up top, which points to a further bearishness in this pair. So daily candle was quite bearish. Now we may see a pushback into this 43,300 level. And if the price stays below the 4,300 level, we may see further weakening here in the pound and back into this 40.50 area, 140.50 area. And if this level holds, then we may see a pushback up. However, if it does not hold, if the price moves below this 140.50 area, we could be looking into 138.50 area, back into these levels here. The big difference between euro and pound is that pound is getting weighed down by the Brexit concerns. Everybody's concerned that UK will leave the eurozone, and because of that, British pound is actually getting pushed down or weighed down by that. Let's take a look at the Australian dollar monthly chart. Again, very, very bullish in this case, and weekly close here as well, very, very bullish, which would point to a further bullish move to the upside. We do have a lot of data coming out for the Australian dollar, and especially the interest rate. So if there are any dovish comments around the interest rate, they're not expected to cut the interest rate this time. However, if there are any kind of dovish comments, we may see a deeper pullback in the Australian dollar, and we are looking at this potentially into this 74.60 or 50 level, and even further down into this one right here, the 73.80 level. We could see a pullback into this. However, overall, the trend is to the upside, and we'll be looking for a bounce at one of these levels for a move to the upside. For the New Zealand dollar, again, we have seen a very strong monthly close, and also for the weekly, we see a very strong bullish close in the weekly as well, which would point to a further move to the upside. So some of the levels we are watching here will be 69.70 level, the previous level, the high that was reached, and then further into this 72.20 level. On the daily chart, we did see some weakness here. Now we'll be watching to see if the 68.20 level holds. If the price holds above the 68.20 level, we're looking for a price move back into the 69.70 level, and then potentially back into 72.20 area. However, if the price comes below the 78.20, we may be looking at a test of this previous lows here at 66.60 level, and potentially the bottom of the range at 65.70. For Canadian dollar, monthly candle has been a very bearish, big move to the downside. Same for the weekly candle as well, very bearish candle. Now for this week, we could see a pullback into this 31.70 level, and if the price holds below this 31.70 level, we'll be looking at potentially move down into 128.70 here, and if price goes through this 128.50 level, we're looking at potentially into 125.60 level, back into this area. From the daily perspective as well, we saw rejection for the dollar CAD, which suggests a move to the downside. So that's all I have for this week. Have a great week of trading, and I'll see you next time.